Good afternoon and welcome to Transition Talks Tuesdays. This Transition Talks Tuesday series is brought to you in collaboration with the Wisconsin Youth Health Transition Initiative as well as the Wisconsin Autism Transition Demonstration Project. We are excited. We were able to reschedule a session that we weren't able to get to in 2025, and I'm so excited because it was a session that I was really, really looking forward to. As I was explaining to people, some of you listening to this know me that I've been doing transition for a little while, and this is an area where I am excited to learn more about. So today we have some folks in that are going to talk about the Independent Living for Youth program with foster care. And I'm going to learn alongside with you all. So I'm just going to turn it over to Kelsey, Amber, Jackie, and Ash, and sit back and learn. Please feel free to put questions in the chat. They will come to those questions at the end. So if you do have questions during the presentation, please hold them to the end. You can either store them in chat and we'll get back to them or write them down and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Thank you, Amber, Kelsey, Ash, and Jackie for being here. Really appreciate your time and your effort and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks for having us. I'll kick us off. I'll do the talking at the beginning of today's presentation, and then we'll move towards Amber and Ash having some conversation and sharing some information as well. And thanks to Jackie, who's sort of behind the scenes and sharing our presentation and things like that today. So I'm Kelsey Hill. I'm the Independent Living Coordinator at the Department of Children and Families. I'm housed in our Bureau of Youth Services specifically, which is a very small team of people who are dedicated to programming that is serving vulnerable youth populations. So independent living is one of the primary areas, but we also have team members who are working on youth justice, runaway and homeless youth programming, anti-human trafficking, and some other related areas. So very excited to be with you here today to teach you a little bit about IL, not to be confused with the similarly named topic from last week, which is independent living administered by Department of Health Services and sort of has to do with a different population group. So not to be confused, but hopefully lots of good learning either way. So I took a moment to introduce myself. I'd like to give the opportunity to Amber to do the same, and then Ash can introduce themselves, and then I will jump into our content.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amber Scarborough. I'm the Independent Living Coordinator. I work specifically with Dodge, Marquette, Sauk, and Columbia counties, but I am based in Madison. And basically, what my role entails is I work with youth who have aged out of the foster care system and help them with a wide variety of resources such as housing, employment, and the social personal connections. So, yeah, really happy to be here. Ash, I will pass it over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ash. I am one of the said foster youth that has aged out of the system, and Amber is my, I want to say, coordinator, who has been helping me through that for like the last 2 or so years. So that has been very helpful to me, and today I will be sharing some of my experiences. So I will pass it back.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here in partnership with Amber, Jackie, and Ash because I work at the state level, but really independent living is executed at the county and the regional level, and having client perspective is so crucial, right? So really that's going to be the sweet spot of our presentation. So I have a fair amount to get through. I'll do my best to do that, quickly and efficiently so we can get over to the next best part. So Jackie, if you want to go to the next slide. So I'll just jump into a program overview. So who we're talking about. So just these are broad strokes. I'll spend some more time in later slides going into a little bit more of the nuance of the program, of which there is plenty. But just broadly, I want us all to sort of be on the same page of what's the population group that we're referring to today and thinking about. So independent living is targeted for youth who are currently or formerly in court-ordered foster care. You might notice today that I slip into the term out-of-home care. We use those terms synonymously. Out-of-home care is really specific to Wisconsin, whereas foster care is a federal term. Both of them essentially mean the same thing, and both of them are umbrella terms and referring to not just foster homes, despite the word foster care, but really encompassing different placement types that youth may be in, such as group home, RCC, which is a residential care center, foster home, kinship care, that type of thing. So independent living is targeted towards those young people who are placed in that type of situation. They are adolescents, which the feds just defined as someone who's 14 years old at least up to the age of 23. So we're really talking about teens who are placed out of home. Often these individuals have numerous placement types and locations. The provider may or may not be known to them. They might be a relative or another loved one, someone who's sort of in their network already, or maybe a complete stranger. Disproportionately, we have individuals from the LGBTQIA population as well as people of color represented in our foster care system. And there is an impact here in terms of connection to community, schools, neighborhood, family. I mean, it's disruptive to be removed from your home and placed somewhere else. And sometimes that means that siblings aren't necessarily put together and things like that. There can be impact on social and financial capital for this population, just because if you're not connected to your family or sort of the network or the roots that you had originally, that can, that can impact what you have at your disposal as you're a young adult moving into older adulthood. But I would argue that despite and certainly in many instances because of the unique challenges of individuals who have been in foster care, they're amazingly resilient and strong and innovative and just a really wonderful population to know and be able to serve. And I continually am learning an awful lot from them. And also a consideration here I should flag is we're talking about young people, and so those are generally sort of harder to place in placement settings, just because there's a shortage of placement settings in general, and there are unique needs for that age group, and people want sort of the babies to be working with, and not always the teens. So that's an added layer of the population that we're talking about today. Next slide. So I won't go a ton into this slide because it's fairly self-explanatory and it really just expands upon what I alluded to, I guess, in the previous slide. But the challenge that independent living is really meant to address at a national and then thus at a state level and at a local level is what some of the primary challenges and barriers and just hardships that individuals in this population can encounter, particularly if they're aging out of care. So young people who have experience in foster care in general are not faring as well as their peers in some primary sort of data areas, but particularly for those individuals who age out of care, which is youth who discharge from care at age 18 or older. So for better or worse, how Wisconsin tracks is how the nation tracks. This is really why there's a dedicated program like Independent Living to create wraparound supports for individuals with foster care experience and support them the particularly crucial time of leaving care and embarking on their own a little bit more. So this is not all of the data points that we could go into today, but just some of the high level ones is just in some primary areas, just faring not as well as their peers, underemployment, unemployment, greater housing instability, more pronounced mental health issues and things like that. So just to make sure that we're all having a general understanding of what we're talking about. Next slide. So yeah, so in terms of who we're talking about, I sort of established that a little bit. So what are we talking about, right? So when we talk about the independent living program, what is it? Again, broad strokes here, and I'll get into some more specificity later. But independent living, as administered by the Department of Children and Families, provides comprehensive, varied, and individualized support to qualifying young adults from age 14 to 23. The key domains are 5 primary buckets, so education, employment, health and well-being, housing, and permanent connections. When we refer to permanent connections, it's really connections outside of formal systems. So aside from counselors and teachers and social workers and sort of the teams that young adults will engage with while they're being served by a given system, who's going to be in their corner beyond those, right? When they're not on a caseload in the same way or, being cared for in the exact same way, is who's going to be in their corner, who are they going to call in the middle of the night to help them out, who's going to, be the people who are showing up for them. So independent living is a required component of case management while youth are eligible and they're in care, and that's for the duration of their eligibility while in care. So it is linked to their placement type, the amount of time they've been in care, and their age, which I'll get into eligibility in just a bit, but it's really meant to be interwoven with other case planning requirements. Independent living is voluntary if a youth discharges from care in a way that continues to qualify them for the program. So that's really where Amber and other individuals across the state administration during the program come in. That's an example of Ash choosing to engage in this program. Those individuals are adults at that point. They're off a court order. It's really up to them to engage in this program as much or as little as they want to, as frequently as they want to, as immediately after discharging from care as they want to. So we commonly say, like, doesn't have to be right away, but so long as an individual who's eligible sort of comes back by the time, or before rather, they're 23 years old, they can qualify, and engage in services. So key components of this are the provision sometimes of direct financial assistance, whether to the client themselves or to like a third party to benefit the client. Also, a lot of referrals to services and benefits, helping young people just maneuver the complexity of qualifying for other programs, of knowing who to call, of knowing where to go, what questions to ask, doing soft and hard skill development. So it's like helping to fill out the application for a job or do that initial search for a job, but also doing some role play potentially to interview for it, right? So it really is quite varied and meant to be targeted to the young person and what they want and need in terms of their independent living wants, needs, and goals. Oh, and I should say, final bullet, can't overlook that. Should always be youth driven and youth responsive, by which we mean that the youth is the primary consideration, the primary player for this, right? It's really meant that the coordinator they're working with is following their lead, walking alongside them to make sure that despite like sort of outwardly we might think might be a good fit for them, or like what we would do for them for ourselves in maybe a similar situation, that it's really tailored to the young person and what's important to them. Next slide. So a couple other additional considerations, just call outs because there can be misconceptions about these, is it doesn't matter so much how a young person came into care, whether they're there on a delinquency order, which is or in the youth justice system, or they're there sort of more for a child and protective services consideration. It doesn't matter so much how a youth comes into care so much as that they're in a qualifying placement type, again, being the right age, having the sort of the necessary amount of time in that placement setting for them to meet the eligibility criteria. So there is confusion there sometimes, like how does our youth justice population fit in? They are embedded in our independent living population. So I will answer the question in the chat because it's a good one and I can easily answer it. So age 23 is a national age limit. So yeah, the feds have established that this program can only go up to age 23, and that is for states that have extended out-of-home care populations, of which we do, but I'll speak to that in a little bit. Ours is kind of unique. So it is an option for states with an extended out-of-home care to extend at 23, and we didn't always have that. We enacted that shortly after COVID because we actually piloted serving youth to that older age during COVID with some additional money, and we heard such good things about it that we kept it in place permanently from 2023 onward. Good question. All right, so the other bullets on here is we just want to be mindful that youth with high support needs must be given choice and voice similar to other peers in case and transition planning. So, very much might be a team approach, which really independent living at its best always is, but just being aware of like who are those other primary players who are meeting youth needs that need to be part of these conversations, and really providing accommodations or whatever it might be for the young person to still be able to actively direct and participate in their own case management and their own transition planning. And then related to that, making sure that youth have developmentally appropriate understanding of their health and mental health care needs, diagnoses, supports, treatment options. So understanding the why behind medications and appointments and, requirements and things, like having healthcare professionals be part of these conversations for young people. I think very often we hear from youth who are in the foster care system or were in the foster care system that a lot was told to them or sort of talked about them, sometimes in their presence, without them fully understanding. And so it's hard to be really a driver of your own future if you don't fully understand all the things that are being discussed and, that have been sort of relevant to your case up to that point. So wanted to call those things out as well. So next slide. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about independent living at the federal level and the state level. So I feel like I jump around a little bit here, but I just wanted to do some like level setting in those first few slides of like what are we talking about, who are we talking about, and then get it a little bit more into the details in these additional slides. So independent living is a federally mandated and federally funded effort. So it's housed within what shorthand we call the Chafee Act. I won't read the whole thing, but you can see it on the screen there. Historically, Chafee Act did refer to transition to independence instead of transition to adulthood. That was a change I think they made in 2019. So the term independent living is kind of a holdover from the prior name of this act. I think it's a little bit misleading. I think it implies that youth need to be wholly independent to be successful and happy and self-sufficient, and that's just not how humans function, right? Like we're always relying on each other for lots of different things. So I wish the name would sort of change in more ways than just title of an act, but here we are. So a subcomponent of the Chafee Act is something called ETV or Education and Training Vouchers. So in our state, similar eligibility as independent living, but it's targeted, and this is federally, it's targeted, and we apply it this way in our state, targeted towards individuals who are pursuing post-secondary education. So it is a distinct funding source with some additional criteria meant to address things that would be a barrier to that youth doing well in school. You can see on the rightmost part of the slide in the yellow box is that federal definition of foster care. So when we're talking about kids qualifying for IL, being placed in a court-ordered qualifying foster care setting, again, either via CPS or youth justice, we're talking about all of those foster care placement types. And again, out of home care in Wisconsin. So funding for the feds is based on states' foster care populations. So I could not tell you the exact formula that they're using, but it's informed by the foster care population the state has. And nationally, the allocation, since Chafee's been around since 1999, don't believe nationally the allocation has changed a whole lot, which means that statewide, per state, the funding hasn't really changed very much either. And for better or worse, there's a lot of gray in the world of independent living. A big part of my job is helping to translate that to make sure that we're in accordance with federal expectations, best practices, and laws of like executing this program as it makes sense in our state. But there's a lot of sort of broad direction and considerable discretion that states have to implement the independent living program in a way that makes sense given their population, their resource, their geographics, other things like that. So it's a blessing and a curse. You can go to the next slide. So here in Wisconsin, again, we have a lot of discretion from the feds about how exactly we apply our IL program. There are some special considerations that I think are always helpful for people to have in mind to know when we're talking about IL and sort of what the reality of this work is. So one really big one is that there's no state funding that's allocated to the independent living program. There's no budget line item in our state budget that is directed towards this program. And that we are an outlier. As far as I'm aware of other states, that's very uncommon to not have a dedicated funding source to supplement what the feds offer us. So that means we are really bound to what the federal allocation is and also what the federal rules are, right? There's a lot of value and appeal to having a diverse funding source for a program. And so we don't currently have that as much as we would hope. Our child welfare system as well, if you're not familiar, is also unique in a few key ways. So we are a county administered, state supervised child welfare state. So what that means, I think we're one of maybe a dozen states in the country that functions this way. What that means is there's a state DCF, such as where I work, that makes like the guidelines, the standards, the expectations, but then there's a lot of discretion at the county level to actually implement those, right? Of meeting that sort of end goal or that broad expectation, the look and feel of it, the actual application of it can vary, it does vary, county by county. Again, similar to the Fed sort of passing down vague guidance to us passing it down to the county, is that there can be a lot of discretion to just like geographic considerations, population, agency structure, resource availability, that type of thing. The other thing that's, sorry, my computer just went blank on me. Here we go. The other thing that's unique about us is that Milwaukee is an exception within an exception. So Milwaukee is state run within this county administered state supervised system. So Milwaukee actually has a component in DCF that's called the Division of Child Milwaukee Child Protective Services, and they contract for their child welfare services between two private agencies. So that's an exception within an exception. We also have very limited extended out-of-home care in our state, so that is also something you consider is states that have broader extended out-of-home care are very strategic with embedding that into their independent living program and really like what do their supports look like for kids up to the age of 23. In our state, we have extended out of home care, which the highest possible age for that is 21. That's a federal limit. But in ours, it's conditional on education status. So a youth has to have an individualized education plan and be enrolled in secondary school or an equivalent and be under the age of 21 to qualify to be in extended out of home care. So not very many young people in foster care sort of meet all three of those requirements in the right combination. And of those who do, it's voluntary, not all of them opt to do it. So we have a very small extended care population in our state. We also have this two-tiered independent living service model, which I'll talk a little bit more in just a moment. And again, which is like why Amber and Ash are here, where we have regional partners serving youth post-discharge, and we have county and tribal child welfare agencies serving youth while they're in care. As a result of all of the preceding bullets, we have narrower program eligibility compared to what the feds would permit. So the feds broadly say like a kid who's in care after 14 can be IL eligible. I mean, that's a pretty big sweep. In our state, we've had to sort of slice and dice our eligibility a little bit just to be strategic with our limited resources, because it's really a balance of quantity versus quality, right? We don't have the funds or the manpower at this time to broaden our eligibility as much as we would really like to. So our eligibility is a little bit complex, and I will dive into that in just a bit. And then ETV is called Brighter Star. So that's a consideration specific to our state, actually named by young people. So I want to make sure people are aware of both those terms. Next slide. So this is a very text-heavy slide. I think it's the worst of the ones that I put together, but that's intentional because our eligibility is very complex. There also is a link on this PowerPoint that's accessible to folks in terms of going and looking at the actual document. So the first bullet just reiterates what I already said, which is again, it doesn't really depend on how a young person entered care so much as like what their placement type is. But there's eligibility at two tiers, and there's multiple ways the youth might qualify depending on who's serving them. So while a youth is under county or tribal child welfare care with a child welfare agency, there's two ways they can qualify. The vast majority of youth will qualify from the first bullet, which is being in a court-ordered foster care placement at least 6 months and being at least 14 years old. And then youth can also be automatically eligible if they turn 17 and a half while in foster care, or they enter foster care at the age of 17 and a half or older. In both those instances, the youth will be eligible for as long as they continue to be in a qualifying placement type. It doesn't have to be the same exact placement. They could, as I alluded to before, move around, but it has to be like they're continuing to go from foster home to group home or whatever it might be, any combination of those that fit within that federal definition of foster care. The reason for the second bullet of that automatic eligibility is that those youth don't necessarily have 6 months of time to accumulate before they turn 18, which is when many young people will discharge from care. And so we don't want them to be disqualified from sort of receiving the benefits of IL while in care just because of their age. And then important call out is youth missing from care or in a trial reunification remain eligible as long as their placement remains open. So even though a youth may be physically absent from a placement or may be technically at home, but their placement for all intents and purposes is still open, they would continue to be eligible. And that's really something we caution our CWA partners, our child welfare agency partners, to be aware of, that youth aren't prematurely disqualified from being eligible. And then for eligibility after discharging from care, depends on how and sort of when a young person discharges from care. So 3 ways to qualify. The first is the most common way, which is that a youth aged out of court-ordered foster care. So that means they discharged at age 18 or older. Smaller subsets will qualify in the next 2 ways, one of which is entering a guardianship on or after their 16th birthday, again, following their time in court-ordered out-of-home care placement, or being adopted on or after age 16 following time in care. So those are much smaller populations, like per year, that we're talking about. And youth eligible via adoption or guardianship typically receive services starting at age 18. So there can be a little bit of a gap there of when they enter that permanency situation to when the Transition Resource Agency, which is the regional IL partner, would actually start serving them. And eligibility ends at age 23, regardless of how the young person qualifies. Next slide, please. I won't spend much time on the slide at all, just to say that for the most part, youth are flagged as eligible in our state child welfare database, which is called the EWIS-ACWIS, which is a mouthful. But there are some circumstances where a youth was being served outside of Wisconsin's child welfare system, but would potentially qualify for our program. So just to say that we have manual processes for hopefully as much as we can capturing those young people. So being referred by a tribal agency, coming from out of state, circumstances like that. So I work in partnership with whomever I need to make those determinations for eligibility. Next slide, please. This is another one I won't spend a lot of time on, and I can always provide this in a different format if that's helpful. But one thing we've heard from our child welfare partners is it's helpful to know, to the degree that DCF can sort of weigh in on it, is like, how might youth with foster care experience qualify for other benefits? So in no way am I a subject matter expert on things orchestrated by HUD or by FAFSA or by, DHS in terms of Badger Care, but we found this crosswalk as being kind of helpful of what the cut points are for youth with foster care experience to qualify for other benefits. So how this is organized is sort of the youngest relevant age for that benefit. So FYI, for example, is a housing voucher, and the criteria for that is that a youth was in foster care at any point for any amount of time, and the added consideration that they're facing homelessness, right? So this is just meant to show sort of like the intersection of IL eligibility with these other potential benefit areas. This is where really the regional independent living partner is crucial, I would argue, is to help young people maneuver this, right? Like if there are a number of things that they'll qualify for related to their time being in foster care, who can help them make sense of that? Who can help them know who to reach out to, what application to fill out, how to be persistent? Because honestly, sometimes these other systems don't know their own criteria, right? About like how youth who are in care might qualify and what needs to be provided to verify that. That's where Amber and her peers are really crucial. Not speaking for her, for anyone's experience, but that's what I know at my level of things. Next slide, please. All right, key players. So I've done sort of rapid fire with a lot of information, but just want to dive a little bit into what I've alluded to, right? Like what our service model is, this two-tiered system, who the primary partners are. So this visual is very small. Don't expect you to read it. There is a hyperlink. Jackie will put it in the chat so it's accessible to people. But this is a really good resource I encourage everyone to check out when they have the opportunity, because I think this really emphasizes what is the cornerstone of the work that I try to do, and I think a lot of us try to do, is the most important player when it comes to independent living is the young person, right? And that's demonstrated in this resource quite literally because we had 2 young adult consultants help us develop it a number of years ago, and their fingerprints are all over it, right? The design of this, the flow of it, the language that's used, the recommendations that are provided, which is what's in purple, which is the vast majority of this document, are all informed by that youth perspective. And so it's really like they were direct makers of this resource, and just the whole idea that like independent living is anchored in that individual person. There's no one size fits all. There shouldn't be, in terms of what it is, what it looks like, how it serves the individual. Next slide, please. So that shows different age brackets of like throughout a youth eligibility, how might they be served? How can that progress over time? So how independent living is executed in our state, again, being unique in this way with this two-tiered system, is that we have youth services regions. So on this map, if you look and see the one straight at the middle is the green one, that's region 1, and we go clockwise from there. So Amber's from region 5, which is yellow down at the bottom. Milwaukee is its own region because of the scale and scope of the independent living population in that part of the state. But this is really formative to like understanding how IL works in the state. So All 72 counties are required to incorporate independent living into their case management, as I already said. It's a component of their child welfare system. 7 tribal agencies of the 11 federally recognized tribes in the state have opted to have an independent living program. And I have a colleague who works most closely with them. And then there are 7 transition resource agencies throughout the state who are serving youth in their designated area. And then each agency has its own program structure. So important to call out, like even though we have Amber and Jackie and Ash here today, they are serving one part of one region essentially. And we have a lot of variability, sort of broad expectations against, but variability in actual execution throughout the state. So yeah, it's good to hear from them as an example, but they're certainly not representative of everything being done everywhere. So the links on here go directly to points of contact at each of these levels. So if there's ever any questions of like in my county, who's the IL point of contact or neighboring tribe or transition resource agency, who can I reach out to? That's what this is. All right, next slide, please. So I'm wrapping up. I'm sort of leading up to Amber diving into her component. So I just want to talk a little bit about, we do have this distinction of key players and who's doing what at sort of what level of eligibility. So for child welfare agency partners, again, all 72 counties and 7 tribes are responsible for service provision while a kid is in care. For counties specifically, requirements are outlined in DCF ongoing services standards, which is a beast of a document. It's everything related to case management. What do they need to know? Also, some things in statute and other guiding documents. Tribes are sovereign, so they may not have the exact sort of named plan or tool, but they have parallel processes, which is important to keep in mind. But broadly, our IL partners, while kids are in care, are expected to complete with the young person, following the young person's lead, IL assessments and plans, and revisiting those on a regular basis. So when a youth is initially eligible, and then roughly every 6 months thereafter, sort of taking another look at the assessment and plan to figure out like what do they need to sort of get them where they need to go in terms of being more self-sufficient and embarking on adulthood. That can help youth develop skills, pursue work and school, refer them to resources, help them to address hits on their credit potentially, build connections, and more. And then a primary thing too is helping them secure, vital documents and either like sort of get started or continue enrollment in key benefits that are relevant post-discharge. Next slide, please. A subcomponent of kids being in care, the primary player again, is out-of-home care providers. So it would be an oversight to not consider these providers in terms of their role of helping with independent living skill development, because this is where youth spend their time, right? They're in a group home, they're in a foster home. This is really where opportunities for some of that skill development occur. So some examples are like the youth having an allowance to work on financial literacy and money management, being able to use the dishwasher or the washing machine to work on hygiene and basic upkeep, what I think a lot of people take for granted of like role modeling in a traditional family, of sort of through osmosis, learning these skills is like really having out-of-home care providers step up and do some of that intentionally, to help the youth as they move towards independence. And next slide. And then Transition Resource Agency, this is where I'm going to start passing the baton, is we have 6 agencies that serve 7 regions. So we have one partner who serves more than one region, serving youth primarily from ages 18 to 23, who again qualify for IL after they've discharged from care. Participating in really executing what we call a pro-youth network. So not just themselves in-house, what are they providing to clients, but what are they able to leverage in their community and their partners? What can they refer young people to sort of round out those services? They do work with the child welfare agencies prior to youth discharge, particularly during time of transition. So jointly working on a plan that the youth needs to prepare them for that discharge. And then one of the coolest things they do, which I think Amber will speak to a little bit more, is they facilitate what we call a youth advisory council. So a body of young people with lived experience to work on skill building, community, advocacy, and that type of stuff. So I've run over my time a little bit. I apologize. I'm gonna move on over to Amber. This slide I'm gonna just jet through. So this is Brighter Star, a little bit more about that post-secondary funding source. Again, the state version of the ETV funds. All right, Amber, take it from here.
Okay, thank you so much, Kelsey. Kelsey is such like a big support in terms of what I do and like go to her a lot for questions. So thank you so much, Kelsey. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into some aspects of IL or independent living. As I stated, I'm a coordinator, so I work directly with the youth who are aging out of care. And it's really my job to make sure that their transition is smooth and that they have the resources so that they can pursue independence with as much ease as possible. So next slide, Jackie. So I wanted to really highlight that, like with many positions and many things, I cannot do things by myself. It would be really impossible for me to do my job just solo without any other resources or any other organizations out there. So this is just a snapshot of resources that I really heavily rely on in terms of, if a youth is coming to me with help for, or asking for help regarding housing or healthcare or employment. I really have, and I'm continuously building my network of resources. These are again are just a few examples of for like the Department of Health rely on heavily. Food pantries, depending on what the situation is with meals and such for the youth. HUD-funded entities, which Kelsey kind of alluded to before with like the FYI voucher and like Section 8 voucher as well. Those are ones that we are continuously trying to get. It's a little bit of a struggle, unfortunately, just given everything. But anyway, we also use a lot of faith-based organizations. Bridges of Hope is a huge one that has really just been incredible. I would say like the past year. Sandy and Kirk Brown are the founders within I think they're still based in Dane County, but they have really gone above and beyond to help uh, foster youth or youth who are impacted by the foster care system. Um, and they even do these things. The pictures aren't like super big, but on the bottom picture there, you will see at one of our most recent YAC meetings, they put together these things called blessing bags. And basically, what that is, it's a large suitcase that has a whole bunch of items that somebody might need if they're first moving into their apartment. So it'll have like cleaning supplies, a shower curtain, bed sheets, really things that are helpful and crucial for somebody moving into their first place, specifically for youth who might, not have the resources already or might not have the connections. And I think and Ash was there actually, and I think we packed, I don't know, 10, maybe less than that, but it was awesome. There's a lot of stuff in there. So I would really, really recommend checking them out. And then just some other organizations that I go to. So NAMI, for example, who are really focused on mental health. And then another one called One Simple Wish, which I've utilized quite a lot. That is a nationwide organization that basically, if a youth is asking for something, and it can be really anything, it could be like a winter coat or a PlayStation. The worker, so either myself or maybe a social worker who's working with the youth, can put in the wish online, and then it can be granted anonymously by whoever sees it and is like, yeah, I'll pay for that. I'll help that youth get that item. So I've used that at least, I would say, 5 times now, and every wish has been granted. It's incredible. It's such an amazing organization. Um, and then the last one is the UW Fostering Success programs that are all across Wisconsin. I don't think every UW has it, not yet. Hopefully, we'll get to that part, get to that point. But yeah, I've been specifically working with UW-Madison Fostering Success Program, and that middle picture actually is their office. And this program is really geared towards those students that have been impacted by foster care, but other barriers perhaps as well. So if they've had a parent who's been incarcerated or have been impacted by poverty, things like that, it's a really amazing program that gives resources to students at campus. So they'll have things like a food pantry or even just like a pantry full of cleaning supplies or things that the student might need. UW Milwaukee especially is like the biggest example of it. They have a really amazing fostering success program. We've been really taking a lot of insight from them. So this is just a small snapshot, but these are like definitely very important ones. Next slide, please. So these flyers here, you might not be able to read them exactly, but that's okay. They are basically flyers that when I am starting to get connected with the youth or get connected with their worker prior to aging out. Usually I'm working with a social worker and we are talking and we're figuring out, okay, when are we going to meet with all together with the youth to figure out like what are the plans once they age out. And these flyers are really helpful in talking about what can I help with? What are the resources that I'm able to help with the youth? So, as Kelsey already mentioned, things like housing, education, employment. But then also on the FAQs, you'll see there are more specific questions like, can the aisle coordinator give me rides? Unfortunately, in our region, we can't, or at least like where I'm at, we can't. And then other just specific questions like a car purchase, because there are a lot of really specific and nuanced examples where youth will be coming to me with different needs, and I have to really take it case by case. So yeah, usually what happens is I'll meet with the youth and the worker, hopefully around like 17 or 17 and a half. I give them these flyers. I try not to overwhelm them with all the information because it's a lot. But I find that these are really helpful just to give them a snapshot of what we can provide with the IL program. Okay, the one of the amazing parts, one of my favorite things ever is the Youth Advisory Council or YAC. Kelsey mentioned this previously, but this is a really incredible thing that we do, where we meet monthly and also like quarterly, and we meet on a local level. So, for instance, Ash has been to a couple of the ones that we host here in Madison at our office. And this whole thing began in 2005 and it's consisting of the former and current youth who were impacted or in the foster care system. And it's a way to find community because unfortunately for a lot of these young people, it's really hard to find connections with others or maybe find connections with people that can relate to them. But it also is covering other things besides the kind of just basic community part. We talk about ways to advocate because we really want to make sure that if youth are going forward, and you'll see in the picture here, we actually have in May something called Legislative Day, where we go to the state capitol and we talk to legislators and we talk to them about why independent living is so important and why people need to be listening to these young people. We talk about that. We talk about education, training, awareness, and this can really be a wide variety of things, whether we're talking about how to do your taxes, which is coming up next month. So we will have like a tax workshop, right, on how to do that. Um, Healthy relationships. A lot of youth like don't know what that looks like. So we've had in the past, what is a healthy relationship? And then a fun one that I've included, this was a flyer from a previous one. I think Ash, you were at that one too, was how to make a zine workshop. So we actually partnered with a local community resource here, a local organization. They came in and they taught us how to make a zine and how zines can be about anything. It can be about foster youth and foster care if you want it to be. It can be about social advocacy and all of that. So yeah, it's a really, really fun time. I always have so much fun just hanging with everybody and getting to hear like what they want to do. And then again, we have our monthly meetings. That's at the local level, and then quarterly meetings are at the state level. So like that picture from the Capitol is the state level where people from all across those regions come together. Okay, so I have included just a few examples here of what it might look like for a young person, either who has aged out recently, or maybe, as Kelsey said, right, they don't have to connect with me right away. They might have um, decided not to engage with me, but then they decide years later, like, hey, I do want to work with you. I've just given some scenarios to kind of give a better understanding of what are the things that pop up, what are barriers that pop up, and then what would it look like for me on my end to engage with them. So these are obviously not real people, but they are based off things that I've had to help youth with. So for example, this first young person, they might like, let's say they're aging out. They have Badger care. They do have stable housing. There aren't really any significant health issues that have popped up or that they're aware of. They do feel like they're part of a community. Maybe they had a really strong like friend group in school. They have savings, they have a car. So then what would it look like on my end with my involvement? Most likely it's going to be pretty minimal. This can change at any time, of course, depending because, life happens and things happen. But most likely my involvement will be very minimal. We will be focusing on things like long-term goals, like, okay, like, do you want to get a job? Where do you want to work? What kind of employment are you envisioning? And then we can look into maybe employment training and then also education plans. Are you wanting to go to school in the future? Okay, well, we can help pay for that. Like, what are you wanting to study? So, yeah, this is just one scenario. So I'll go on to the next one. So here's another, just again, made up, but based off real life scenario. So this is another young person. Maybe they have some savings. They do have housing, but they're not really sure what they want to do career-wise. They don't have a car, but they have access to a bus. Maybe it's nearby where they live. They do have some social connections, but maybe they could build on that more. And they are diagnosed with some mental illness. They're diagnosed with bipolar and ADHD, and they're not sure if they have health insurance. This happens quite a bit with youth, especially who I've reconnected with. I'll say, "Do you have Badger Care? Do you have insurance?" And they're like, "I don't know. I'm not sure." So then it's my goal with my involvement. That's probably the first thing I'm going to figure out is, okay, let's get you signed up for some healthcare insurance. Usually they will be eligible for Badger Care. There's always exceptions, but usually in that case, they will be eligible for that. And then we can focus on other things like, again, what are your goals in terms of employment? What do you want to do? Are you wanting to go to school? What do you want to study? If so, and then for specifically that bipolar disorder and the ADHD, we would look into specific mental health resources and just general long-term goals. Okay, you'll notice these situations get a little bit more dire as they go on. But this other person, so they don't have any housing. They are homeless. They don't have any savings. They don't really have any interest in employment or education. And there's really no connection to community or family in any way. And the social worker has shared with me that there might be some history of drug misuse, which might still be happening, but they do have Badger Care Plus. So if the youth decides to work with me, my involvement will probably be a bit more intensive than the previous young people. I will have to really sit down with the youth and talk about, okay, like what is our plan right now? How are we going to get you into housing? How are we going to make sure that you are having the mental health resources that you need? And also like AODA resources. And maybe if there is a resource for drug users. How can we go about making sure they're connected in that way? And also community building. So YAC might come into play here. Well, I'll tell them, hey, we have this monthly meeting where we get to connect and talk about really awesome things. And we also always have food. So you should come through and hopefully find that connection there. Okay, and this is my last one. So this young person is unfortunately was a human trafficking victim. They are pregnant. They do have stable housing. They have a HUD voucher, but they don't have employment. There's no car transportation. They might be in a more rural area. There's really no connections, family, or community. And the social worker previously had shared that there might still be involvement with the trafficker. They didn't complete high school either, and they're not sure about their health insurance. So obviously, my involvement is going to be much more intensive, especially because they are a trafficking victim. I want to make sure, health insurance is all good to go if they're set up with Badger Care or something else. Again, want to make sure that they're getting that navigation to probably mental health resources as well. And then also, we do have financial support for youth who are impacted by human trafficking. There's like another set of funds that I can utilize to help that young individual, whether that's to set up housing, to look into education and employment. So, and also talk about like transportation planning. What would that look like if it's like trying to get their driver's license, trying to get a bus pass? So yeah, every situation again is different, but I thought that these snapshots would just help give kind of an idea of the different young people that I work with and yeah, their different scenarios. I think that's it on my end.
Yeah, so we'll have Jackie stop her screen share. We'll pop the in the chat. We'll pop in the link for this resource, that guide for youth who are placed in out-of-home care in Wisconsin, because it's again would be really good for people to view, and also it's available for free for order. So we want people to make use of it and share it with their clients and everything. But now it's opportunity for Ash and Amber to have a little bit of a conversation about Ash's experience engaging in the program. So take it away.
Awesome. Okay, Ash. So I'm just gonna start off with, as you said, you've been working with me for a little bit now. Like, what to you has been the most supportive aspect of working with me? What have I helped you with?
I want to say the most supportive part about working with you has been like just the sheer amount of connections I've found through you, because a lot of times like I've been in a rough patch and I just needed like people to be around me, or like access to connections that I maybe didn't know was there. And almost every time that I've gone to you, you've been like, okay, so here are your problems. Here are things that can help with that. And you send me those resources. You invite me to these communities where I might be getting more help. And that has been successful to building myself as an individual, but also learning to kind of lean on others for help when I don't know what to do with myself.
That's awesome. That makes me happy to hear. I'm glad. Um, Another question is, what do you think would we need to see more of, or what would have like helped you to have a better transition from foster care to independence or to the IL program?
I did write some of these down, so if I'm looking down, sorry about that.
No
But
worries.
I think I've been fairly lucky when it comes to like things that have been like where it's worked well and where it hasn't worked well. Because when I aged out at 18, I kind of felt really scared to reach out at first because I hadn't really had much conversation with independent living by myself. So I had to ask my foster parents a lot, even after leaving, how to contact you guys, how much you guys would be able to help. And I felt really kind of alone and confused at first. So I think more communication with both the foster parent and the youth prior to leaving, just to make sure that the youth is aware of what all you guys can help with, would help more.
Absolutely. And I'm sure many other young people feel the same way as you do, for sure. Okay, so let's see. What specifically with like healthcare and health support, like what support have you gotten from me or just like the IL program in general in terms of like getting connected to a doctor, mental health professional, those kind of things?
I want to say, like, even just like a month ago, I was really struggling, and I know I came to you. I was like, I'm really not doing well, and you personally offered to get in touch with me in person, and we went through all the problems that I was facing and what I think I needed in that moment. And then after we had that talk, you went and looked for those resources and sent me an email to all of them. So you're very active in helping whatever I may need, whether it's healthcare, whether it's mental health support, doctors. I know for me personally, I've been kind of looking into transitioning. You've been very helpful with looking into resources for that. So you just kind of hands-on help has been really helpful.
Awesome. I want to be, am I like good with time or is there, I don't know. Okay, okay. I just want to make sure I'm not going over anything like that. Okay,
No,
awesome.
Amber, I'm kind of in charge. So, we're gonna go as long as we need to go. Anybody needs to pop off, they can pop off, but I want to make sure that we have you guys discuss what's important.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. Um, so you've really highlighted, Ash, like what has worked well with you, with this program specifically. Is there anything else you want to highlight? Maybe things that like haven't really worked well, like things you would like to see more of with the IL program. Any suggestions?
Um, I'm just gonna read this out. I think the thing that has worked the best with the independent living program is the in-person events like the Yak, where we gather in a group. of people who are somewhat in similar positions, and we all do something together that helps us learn more about living on your own, and how to get involved in things. And also another thing that has worked really well is the encouragement to get involved in said things, because sometimes you can just be kind of in your own head, and it's good to get out more and try and connect with these people who might share similar experiences. I haven't really had that much that hasn't worked well, besides I want to say maybe more clarity on like time frames for like what you can help with, because there's been a few times where I know I've put in requests and didn't know when they would come through, when I know like it's something that I'm kind of relying on, and I just like knowing the time frame a little bit better would be helpful, because it's mildly anxiety inducing, and it's something that is important to helping me through the month, the next few months, whatever. But other than that, I don't think I have very many like tips. You guys are doing very well as is, and you guys have been very helpful to me so far.
Thank you, Ash. I'm really happy to hear that. Um, I think the other question I have is kind of repetitive. So I don't know, Ash, if there's anything else you just want to share, or do you think you've like kind of covered everything? Really appreciate you speaking.
Um, I know there was one last question that you had sent to me prior to the meeting, because you sent me a bunch of questions that maybe talked about, and it was, what are the barriers you are still facing, just to kind of get an idea of where you guys might want to help next. I think for me personally, I'm struggling with trying to keep like a savings and knowing how to handle finances in a way that's like productive to me for the future, so I can pay bills on time while also still catching up on things that I need to, and having savings for whatever I may need in the future. Because one of my big goals for this year is trying to save up for a car, so I can get easier resources to a job, get easier resources to you guys, and just as well as knowing what all I may need if I ever choose to move into my apartment of my own, and like what kind of resources I should be looking into then.
Absolutely. I'm making notes in my head, Ash, and I'm gonna do some research later. So we'll talk. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Anything else that either of you want to share? Ash, you're so good to sit with us for so long and just
Right?
take in information, and then, to participate most actively at the end. You were obviously paying good attention the whole time. I saw your kitty at some point, which was very cute. But just want to thank you for your time. But yeah,
Yeah,
anything else?
sorry about that. He was getting into a box he wasn't
No,
supposed
don't
to be at the
apologize.
camera.
I have two
Wrangle.
naughty kitties and one naughty dog, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's good.
cats are drawn to live internet feeds.
Yes.
Um,
He's like, "Oh, you're doing something? Can
They're
I
the
be in
star
they
of the internet, so they're like, it's
You've
my
heard
moment.
they drawn right to it. It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, thank you all very much. I do have a couple of questions that could be answered here, and if you're like, Tim, come on now, you expect me to pull that out? We could connect afterwards. So
Yeah.
one of them was I go back to the beginning of the presentation, I think with Kelsey, and one of the data points you pointed out was the percentage of people that have received some mental health support and percentage that would say they would like to receive mental health support.
Mm.
Um, in how you guys are tracking data, is there any other data like around disability or, specifically around like autism, ADHD? Um, I'm just again looking at this intersection between the children and youth with special health care needs population and the foster care population,
Yeah.
because a lot of the struggles and barriers and um, mountains that young people are climbing
Yeah.
are so similar
Yeah.
to people that aren't in foster care but do have a disability that are also struggling to establish their own life
Yeah.
outside of their family home, establishing community connections, keeping employment and work, understanding healthcare. I I'm sitting there going, yep, yep, yep.
Yeah.
Where's our big general office on kids with disability becoming adults that have
Yeah.
people like Amber to help them walk into adulthood with somebody that they can call. Just watching, Ash's interaction with Amber, Ash
Yeah.
having that person to be able to call and say, you know what? Today's just not a great day. Do you got five?
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
is so valuable in life. And it's something that not everybody grows up with. Not
Yeah.
everybody has that in their developmental age. And so to be able to connect with something like that is really, really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I asked a question like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Like any like sort of data beyond mental health that you guys collect?
So this is one where I think I'll have to follow up with you on, because the data, I think what you're referring to is that challenge slide from the beginning, which is like a combination of both national and state. It's called
Yes.
NETD data, so National Youth and Transition Database data, which is a federally required survey that states administer to kids while they're in care and then for a few years following their discharge from care. So I can look back at that and just see if there's any other sort of yeah, broad sort of health themes that would be meaningful to pull out for you. The specific things you mentioned, like ADHD and autism, I don't know that there's anything that specific in the
Yeah.
NIDed survey, and not to my knowledge that like we as an agency collect, but that's something that like I feel like if I did a little bit of research, I could find some information for you. I mean, anecdotally, I've been told and I'm aware there's like sort of an overrepresentation of individuals with those advanced needs in the foster care population, right? And it's a little bit of like the chicken or the egg, right? Being in foster care is by definition traumatic, because, kids have been removed from their home, regardless of circumstance of why they were. The literal act of being removed from their home is traumatic, and then layer on like what the scenario was, that contributed to that. And yeah, Alicia made a good point in the chat is like there's an assessment called the CANS, which don't ask me what what it stands for. She probably knows, but there might be something that's also administered for young people who are in care that we might be able to pull some information from. So on the spot, I don't have anything concrete for you, but I feel like we could get some good information for you of that intersection of those needs. Yeah. There you go. Child and
Childland,
adolescent needs and strengths assessment.
fantastic. And also, Ash, I appreciate your comment in the chat as well. Yes, applying for disability or SSI or those programs that could be supportive.
Yeah.
We
Again,
need help with. It's not
confusing,
always
right?
straightforward. Yeah,
No.
yeah.
So bureaucratic. And again, like the number of times that I've heard from Amber or young people themselves or like other people doing this work that young people really have to like push for something that they're categorically eligible for.
Hmm.
Like Badger Care, there's certain criteria that youth are categorically eligible to qualify until they're 26, but the person on the other side of the phone doesn't know that or doesn't understand it
Right.
or feels like they need a lot more information, than they actually do. And so like for a young person who's maneuvering that on their own, that's a really easy way to shut down or be confused or to become disillusioned and just give up, right? For the young
Absolutely.
people who have the ambers, like that might be a person who can be like, wait, hold up, you are right, and this person is wrong, and like, hopefully just having gone through the process a little bit more can like advise on really in a strategic way how to push back on that. And that's just something like even at state level we're trying to reconcile, right? Like at my level, I'm talking to people at DHS about like your people on the ground are not always saying things that are accurate to clients, and that is
Hmm.
a real disservice to them. And so it's hard. Not everybody's on the same page, even when it's like sometimes it is sort of black and white. Many things are not,
Right.
but sometimes they are. Yeah.
Yeah, the gray area doesn't exist everywhere. Some things
Right.
are like,
It's not always
no,
great.
this is their age, this is their
Yeah.
whatever, so therefore this should
This.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we deal with that with the early periodic screening,
Yeah.
diagnosis stuff with Medicaid. It's just like, no, there are Medicaid. This is a
Mm-hmm.
medically necessary thing, so yes, you will pay for it. Some things are black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that also brings me up of how do you have any idea off the top of your head how many, well, actually two questions about how many youth are in out-of-home care in
Mm.
Wisconsin, and then how many take advantage of the IL program, like the
Yeah.
percentage
So
that
good
get into
question.
IL.
So we actually have a dashboard for youth and out-of-home care. So I think that's something I'll send you after today's meeting because I don't want to misspeak about our numbers. Um, what I will say is we have about between 200 and 300 youth a year who age out of care. So sort of that biggest bucket of kids who are going to qualify for independent living. That's fluctuated a little bit in recent years because there's been a real attempt to not have youth discharge in that way, right? Like more of an emphasis on permanency and reunification and that type of stuff. But then in terms of like, so that sort of accounts for our biggest IL population post-discharge. Um, from the reports that I get from our regional partners, which is twice a year, there's about 650 to 700 kids in the state who are engaging in regional independent living services. So that I don't have a unique count reporting period to reporting period, so there could be a kid who's sort of included in both halves of the year. But that sort of gives an idea of scale of at least about like yeah, how many are being served at any one time. There's a lot of variability, right? So to the examples that Amber gave in terms of like intensity of need and intervention and supports and things, it varies a lot. And not all regions are equal in terms of how many youth literally live there, right? Some are more spread out and more rural and things like that. And then in care, I mean, I don't have the exact number, but it would be an awful lot if you're talking about every 14-year-old who has at least 6 months of time in care, at any one time. So I can give you some hard numbers, but not all of them, but I can follow up.
It's okay. I live in a world where, I've asked for hard numbers for years and people are like, we don't really
Some
know.
of them exist. I just need to track them down. If I'm quick, I could maybe get this dashboard for you in real time, but I don't know if I can do that right
Okay,
now.
well, in that case, I'm going to move on to questions for Amber and Ash.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so one of the things that you mentioned is that you connect the youth to like health insurance option, the young adult youth to health insurance options. As part of that, I know that with the population we have, we've learned that even at age 18, 19, that sometimes the youth aren't aware of how to utilize that health insurance, how to make appointments, how to talk to your doctor, what's appropriate to talk to the doctor about, how to fill prescriptions, how to refill prescriptions. Um, do you guys go over that at all with them as you also talk about health insurance?
I would say maybe not on that in depth of a level. At least, like, I haven't run into a specific young person who has needed that in depth of like
Okay.
specificity, but I do try to offer, like, for example, if a youth is they need to sign up for Badger Care and they're like, well, I don't know how to do it. I will offer like, okay, why don't we do like a three-way call? So I'll also be on the call. Because like Kelsey said, it can be really confusing for a youth who has never done it before, doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I do that for like, if they're signing up for food share too, that can be an option. But I would be more than happy to if it ever came to it where a youth was like, I have no idea how to set up appointments or talk to a doctor. Like I hope I make it clear that I'm very open to that. I just haven't run into that. But I feel like my coworker Priscilla, who works specifically with Dane and Jefferson counties, she is very, very hands-on with a lot of her young people. And I have a feeling that she has probably very much helped in those situations.
Would you mind if I say something real quick? I do just
Please.
want to say, in my personal experience, I have like some of that aspect where like I'm not entirely sure what I'm supposed to do when going to a doctor's appointment. So I think like kind of leaning more into that as well when aging youth out of the foster care system, because it can be a little bit anxiety inducing to go to the hospital, because that in itself is like a I'm going to the hospital, there's something wrong with me type thing, where it's like you you don't get as comfortable just kind of going to checkups, because it feels like something that needs to be a kind of set thing for, like, this is just for emergencies. How much is this going to cost? How much is my insurance going to be able to help with this? And so, like I said, me personally, I've been struggling trying to find out like when I should be going to checkups, what things I need to be scheduling in order for myself to stay healthy. And luckily, Amber has been helping with like Badger Care. She got me signed up for Badger Care, so we got that sorted out in that aspect. But just kind of like the more emotional aspect of getting into what youth may need in the future when it comes in regards to their health, because I'm very bad at that, knowing what
Yeah.
appointments I may need to schedule and what is kind of like the norm for what people who visit hospitals and get checkups yearly for what they may need.
Yeah. Thank you, Ash. I totally agree. And I think that we thanks to some of the changes years ago where we had this, okay, you could go see a doctor once a year for sort of a well adult check. Like we graduated from well child checks. Now we have well adult checks. And from people that I've talked to, they're just like, well, yeah, I feel like I should see the doc, but I'm going to see him anyway in 2 months. So I'll just bring it up then. And it's like, no, 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 no. That's not what that visit is for. And if there's something going on now, you need to deal with it now. But without being able to talk about that, you're not going to intuitively know that because, like, okay, I see the doctor once a year. It's like, okay, your health can be more than that. So I appreciate that. Another sort of question that in this parallel, I'm going to be admitting my total ignorance of this. Okay, so I am not involved in the foster care system. I don't know if I know people that grew up in foster care or graduated foster care. In the world of disability, we're still dealing a lot with stigma, which comes with just this whole concept of ableism. But we have kids who, once they graduate, even if it's a medical disability, they really don't want to talk about it. And sometimes they don't want to acknowledge it and they don't want to take care of it and they don't want to access the services. They just want to be done with it. Like kids who say, you know what? I'm tired of being diabetic. I just don't feel like being diabetic anymore. So I'm just not going to take my insulin. I don't feel like being autistic. So I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm autistic. And I'm just curious, is there the same sort of stigma for people that have been involved in out of home care and been through foster care?
I want to say, for me personally, haven't really had that struggle, but I know for like one of my friends who is also in foster care, um, he struggles with wanting to apply for disability because he's afraid that it may, like limit his options for the future when it comes to like jobs and things like
Mm,
that. So, he kind of pushes that back in trying to get help for himself because he doesn't want to limit his options for the future. And I know for me personally, I am kind of nervous to try and get diagnosed with ADHD, even though everyone around me has told me I have it, because of the fact that then I would have this kind of label over me and something that I may need to get help for that may cost another expense, another kind of thing that would be just another thing to stress about. So it is something that is present, but not as, I think it kind of varies person to person depending on what the
yeah.
issue is.
Yeah, I think that fear of
Mm,
labels is something that even at my level I hear because I think there's like already sort of this labeling of like a foster youth, right? The fosters, like whatever weird variation of
yeah.
referring to people who've had foster care experience, which there's a lot of outward stigma of like, oh, kid must have done something bad to be in foster care, right? And like it's
Yeah.
just such a
Yeah.
misconception of like really how it works and what those circumstances are and who these young people are. So yeah, I've heard sort of that compounding labeling can be, I think, really hard for young
Mhm.
people. It's like, oh, I was in the foster care system, but also I have this like other additional need, and I think the fear of sort of all being like boxed together, being treated as sort of a monolith like that, like kids who are in care XYZ or did XYZ. And um Yeah, that was really good perspective, Ash, too. I mean, your ultimate point is true, which is like it just really depends. Like, yes, every young person will embrace this experience or react to it in different ways. I mean, just like programmatically, we have a number of young people who when they leave care are just sick of the system, right? To your point, like they don't want to engage in services, even though,
Yeah.
you know, like objectively they could potentially benefit, but they're just like, I've been told what to do or how to do it or like where to go or what to take or anything for however long. And just like, I
Yeah.
want to go do my own thing for a while. And so sometimes when Amber has kids come back to her for services, like they're in a stage of crisis, which is not what we want. Sometimes they're not. And it's like, you know, I'm just ready now. Like I'm just ready to make this choice for myself to be engaged in these programs. But yeah, there sometimes can be sort of that gut reaction of like, this didn't feel good to me. I didn't like being in care and I just want to go do something else for a while.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we talk to our families about in transition is that one of the most important things you could do is to make sure you're maintaining that relationship
Hmm.
so that when they do go out and fail, because we're all going to go out and fail, it's just part of human life. We make mistakes, we fail. But to be able to have someone to come back to and say, I screwed up, and then saying, it's okay. Where are you today? What can we do from here? It doesn't matter. Everybody messes up. Let's move forward. And encouraging families to establish that sort of relationship. And so with IL, having the people like Amber in that position where a young adult could say, hey, guess what? I tried it all on my own for 2 years and it sucked. And I know you mentioned some resources that could help me. I'd like to talk about those now. That seems perfectly natural to
Yeah.
me. And I'm grateful that there's a place that they can go back to like
Yeah.
that.
And I think that's like, I mean, again, I feel like I'm speaking a little bit for someone else, but like, you know, I think that's an effort in different ways. So one is sort of like laying that groundwork initially, right? So we talked a little bit, we sort of breezed through it, but like helping kids during transition. So Amber meeting potential clients at like 17 and a half to avoid that overwhelm, but literally just be like, this is available to you. This is what it means. I'm your person. Like, here's my contact information. And then, you know, Amber and others, I think, have strategic ways of reminding the youth of their eligibility. So some of our partners send like birthday cards around the youth's birthday, or like if they know they're going to
Mm.
graduate from a certification program, or like just certain times of year, just like, or 10 text messages just to be like, I'm here, no pressure, like just, you know, keep this in mind. And then I think also to your point, like, what is their attitude and approach when the kid hopefully ultimately does choose to engage with them? Like, no
Yeah,
judgment, no, like, we could have been working together for years now. Like, what were you doing? You know, of just like,
right.
okay, where are you at now? What do you need? How can I help you? And like, where do we go moving forward? Right. So it's kind of a multi-faceted, I think if best executed, sort of like a layered approach of trying to remind youth that you're there without laying on too thick, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're adults
Yes, there we
at
go.
that point, and you want to treat them like adults. That's, one of the things we struggle with is people treating our adults like they're still kids. And it's like, no, they're not. They're adults and they want to make decisions and they want to be responsible and they want to be respected. All right. Well, that takes care of the questions that I think I could formulate right now. I have another one written down that I can't get it right. So I'm going to maybe work on that and email you guys. So thank you so very much. I will be in touch with email. Love whatever slides you are free to share with us,
Yeah.
whatever follow-ups that I need to know to do. But that I'll turn off the recording shortly before I forget that I'm recording. But thank you for making time for all I know we had pre-meetings before.
Yeah.
Ash, thank you for taking time out to share your experience. That is, I cannot tell you how valuable that is. And it's going to be valuable to everybody who's listening to this. So I really appreciate you all being here. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
And Ash, yeah, thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us.
Yeah, of course.